You're listening to Paris: A State of Mind on Paris Underground Radio. For more great content, join us on Patreon at patreon.com/Paris Underground Radio.
Welcome to Paris: A State of Mind. Join us as we talk about the good, the bad, the ins, the outs of property rentals and purchases in and around Paris. We'll have topics for renters, owners, and visitors, share questions we are regularly asked, and more. My name is Gail Boisclair of Perfectly Paris, and my co-host is Marie Pistinier of Loquim Paris. Be a part of it. Both of us are proud members of the SPLM, the first representative body of furnished rental professionals. Here we are, back in the studio for another episode. Paris: A State of Mind. Wow. And how are you doing, my dear Marie?
I'm doing very fine, Gail. And you? What about you today?
I am fine. Did you know? Do you want a little quickly funny story that I sprained my ankle way back when? I think you knew that. But did you know that I sprained my second ankle? What the heck? You know, and let me tell you, we should do an episode about wheelchair access in Paris because I'm getting a little bit of experience at the moment.
I do believe that wheelchairs, subway, and restaurants, metro, everything is complicated when you have some issue.
Not that I'm in a wheelchair, but I was on crutches for a bit. But anyway, but I'm already off topic and we haven't even started yet. So I guess what are we talking about today? Diagnostics, right? And like what the heck they are and why should I care? Why should I care about diagnostics, Marie?
You definitely have to care about that. So we're talking about something that we really mentioned several times, I think, in the previous podcast, but it was always briefly. And I thought that we could go a little deeper into this thing. And when it comes to diagnosis, it's not like a disease or something like that, but it's more like some tools that you can use to rent, purchase, or sell your property smoothly. And it's related to all over France, not only Paris. It's like diagnostics are some mandatory things. Yeah, so sorry. And you have to note that, considering that there is many things to say, we keep one of the hottest topic about the diagnostic for the next episode. And the next one,
I'm intrigued,
will be, the next one, because it's really, there is some strong change in France right now. And the next one will be really on whether it's going to impact the rentals, the sales. You may even be forbidden from renting your apartment in a few years. Oh. So wait for the next episode.
Yeah, everyone's going to be curious. I'm curious. But so I guess, well, what are we talking about when we say diagnostics? What does that mean?
So the diagnostics, the diags, when you are used to be in this field, it has been in place since many years. I think that when I started in 2005, it was already there, and since then it was changed regularly by different laws and different new measures they did. So, for example, if you purchased a flat 10 years ago, the diagnostics you had back then would be completely different and maybe not up to date anymore.
So, like, what exactly is a doctor? It's like a doctor coming to visit your apartment?
It's a bit like that, but and then he's going to give you some advice on what you should do after. The diagnostics are you have to know that it's mandatory by law, and it will be a bit different when you sell or when you rent your property, but it really impacts the two type of transactions. Most of the things are pretty common between when you rent your property and if you just purchase it. Usually you can use the same diagnostics because it's pretty accurate and pretty new. And usually there is a little less in the rental process, but the basics, like the main things are the same. The first thing that we check, of course, it's the size of the property. This is what the doctor is going to check up because when you know, like in Paris, for example, the number of square meters can reach more than 10,000 euro per square meters. Then you want to make sure of exactly how many square meters you do have. And it's true that when you, for example, if you enlarge a wall or if you remove a wall, then this will change the number of square meters. And things like everything below 180 centimeters, for example, will not be counted. Like, for example, if you live under the roof and you have like the attic, like you are basically living in the attic, then a part of the size will be much lower than what you could expect. So it may be interesting or not, depending on whether you are a seller or a buyer. But it's usually the first one that we all are interested in.
Well, and I know from experience with owners who've had the diagnostics redone recently, they've actually lost square meterage because of how they look at it now. So their apartment used to be whatever square meters and now it's less.
Yeah, and
which is kind of really crappy, right?
Yes, and it used to be like the measures they used to take are not exactly the same, and you have like, the diagnosticers guy, they do have like a percentage of error that can be like, I think it's 5% that can be acceptable, but it can be really yes, you can lose few square meters in the process.
Well, and apart from that, like what else would they be checking? Would it be for things, dangerous materials that maybe were used way back when for construction? I don't know, like asbestos, lead, well, I don't know, things like that. Is that it?
Exactly. The lead and the asbestos are the two main things that they are looking for. Lead it's used to be used before 1949. So if you have a property after, you don't have to do these ones. Asbestos, which is amiant in French, is also a very dangerous thing. Not dangerous, but it's dangerous by itself. And if you do have some in your flat, for example, as lead, then you do need to know if it's covered enough. Like, is it the dangerous product are reachable or not? And for example, if you have asbestos and you want to remove it, for example, we had that apartment with like a kind of pipe. And in fact, if you want to have this removed, then you have to pass through specific companies who are used to manage and deal with asbestos. You cannot do that on your own. So, yeah. And for the lead, usually we have some like in old buildings, and usually we have that in the garde-corps. I don't know how you say that in English. The thing that prevents you from falling from the windows, the iron things.
The railing.
Yes. And usually when the diagnostics are coming up, they found lead in that, and sometimes also in the, like what we call les plaintes. How do you call les plaintes?
Yeah, I guess skirting board, or anyway, it's the piece of like stuff that go around the bottom
Exactly.
of the wall that meet the floor. So yeah, I think it's called skirting board in English.
And when it's old and when you have been painting and repainting, sometimes the paint is cracking, and then you can find below some lead. The main issue would be if you eat that. So that would mean that you can picture yourself licking the wall or the railing in order to. So
I do that all the time, Marie.
I'm sure.
That's how I keep my apartment clean.
Yeah, I know. I was sure of that. Now it's dangerous, especially for kids. Like, but it's usually the problem is like when the apartment is not, the property is not well maintained. But this is the kind of thing that they check, like lead and asbestos.
And are there other things that they can check for as well too?
Yes, termites.
That's gross.
Yes, a little bit. By chance, we don't have that many in France. In Paris in particular. But it's very important to check this, because the termites, especially in the old buildings, because once they are in the wood, it can really damage the structure and it can be very dangerous. So it's very important to have this check. But this is not on the diagnostic for the rentals, but it's more like when you buy an apartment, on the sale of the apartment. So it's very important to have this.
And I guess that, yeah, in some parts of France, the termites are just horrible, especially like in the country homes and things like that. But what about things like, I hate to even have the words come out of my mouth, but bed bugs.
I heard you. Yeah, unfortunately, no. I don't know if it's fortunate or not that we don't check that, that it's not mandatory to check for that.
I think they should.
Yeah, but
If they check for termites, why don't they check for bed bugs?
yeah, I know. We could have that. By chance, on my personal experience, I had only one flat in 17 years with bed bugs. But the problem is that once it's here, if the building is not treated, because usually you treat your flat, but if there is any issue with the upstairs neighbors or downstairs neighbors, it can be a real battle that can last very long.
Well, yeah, I know I had somebody recently, a colleague who has her own business like me that rents out flats. And she contacted me because she didn't know what to do. She had bed bugs in one of her apartments. And I told her her first call should be to the syndic, the management company of the building, because I said if they're in her apartment, they may very well be in other people's apartments. So they'll probably have to treat the whole building.
Yeah, you have to treat your own, and you have to. It's complicated. Even though I learned that it can like sleep for many years, and in your books and stuff like that.
Disgusting, yeah. And in like they say wooden picture frames and all this stuff. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and you should. But I think that if you freeze them, then you are good to go. But you have to imagine to have all your apartment stuff frozen. Not very convenient.
Gross. Well, I think that we have to get off of that yucky topic. So after checking about the size of the apartment, dangerous materials, and termites, is that all?
I'm sure you wish it would be all, but we do have many other things to check. The two of the important things to check would be the electrical material and the gas installation. Unless it's very recent, but even though they just checked in order to say that it's very everything is all square.
Well, I know that I've had, well, it's more so with the electricity that there's been issues because things have changed over time and things like that. I've rarely had a gas issue, but we've had stuff where we've had to reinstall certain electrical components because they were no longer in the norm. So yeah, it is important to know that you are safe and sound and your renters are safe and sound, and nobody's going to blow up when they're making dinner on a gas stove, for example.
Yes, that is exactly one of the topic. And I remember for the gas that sometimes it's little thing that, like for example, the tuyau, the little pipe, they do have like a peremption, like a end date that like after a certain time, you have suppose it's like kind of plastic, and I don't know what is the material, but then after a certain number of years, you are supposed to replace it by a new one.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, this is a little thing that they are going to check, and usually the date is written on the little pipe. Sometimes it's old and you cannot even read the date anymore, but you do have to check for that because this is very important for the thing. And for the electricity, it's I guess that once they check the electricity, there is always anomalies. It cannot be like 100% electricity proof and everything. It's impossible. There is always little things, and sometimes diagnostics are complicated to read, even for myself. Even if I'm used to, when you start to read the electrical feedback report,
Crazy.
It's like, yes, because they have specific technical details and everything. So usually you have to pass through an electrician in order to know if the problem they raise are very important, very urgent, or if it's something that it's better if you do so. Sometimes it's very important, like for example, the classical thing would be above in your bathroom and above the mirror you have some lights, and usually above you have some wires, and sometimes the wires are nude, like you can reach them.
Exposed.
Like if there is some splash, you splash some water and it may be dangerous. So this kind of thing that you are supposed to put that somewhere to make sure that it's not reachable. And sometimes it's very important thing, and sometimes it's little thing. So you have to really have someone to read that back in order to see what is the most important thing.
If you're enjoying this episode of Paris, A State of Mind, you may also be interested in our sister podcast, Don't Miss This. Join Jennifer weekly for the scoop on what's happening in Paris. Paris, A State of Mind will be right back after a word from our sponsors. And now back to Paris, A State of Mind. I think with the electricity, where it become so complicated is, well, it's kind of like the plumbing, even though it's not necessarily related to the diagnostics, but everything is just so old in Paris. And the electricity, probably when it was installed, in many cases, it probably wasn't even ever grounded as we would ground things now. I remember at my old apartment, do you remember where I used to live before? So it
Yeah.
was like super old. I wonder if the electricity was ever done after the original installation. I doubt it, because I would even switch on the light for the toilet, and every time I switched it on, there was a spark. Like
Oh,
every time. It kind of freaked me out. In the beginning, it wasn't like that, but then it was getting like that. And then another issue I had at my old apartment with the electricity is I was doing laundry, literally, and working on my computer, as always. And the electricity went out everywhere in the apartment. I'm like, oh, that's weird. And I tried to figure out what was causing it. And so I'm walking around, and then I started smelling the smell of something burning. And I was like, what the heck? And I swear that had I been maybe even 10 or 20 seconds later, it would have been too late, because when I found the source of what was burning, it was the plug for the dryer, and it was completely burning. There was smoke coming out of it. I thought, geez, what do I do? Of course, I don't want to touch it and get electrocuted. So I grabbed a pair of rubber soled shoes, one in each hand, and I pulled the plug out with my hand inside the rubber soled shoes. And luckily I did, because it was just in the process of burning the entire plug, which would have meant it would have went into the electrical system and the apartment would have caught on fire.
yeah. No, you are lucky to.
Like, I mean, that's dramatic, but
Yeah.
it totally freaked me out.
This is very important to get all the. I see that in some old place, we have a lot of every apartment who has been renovated. Usually, the guys are taking care of the electricity. They change the panel, the electric control panel. They change it to modernize it and everything. So more and more, it's good. But you're right, the grounded plug. It's very often that it's not related to the ground. So it's one of the things that we really have to take care of. And usually, when you read your diagnostics, you will have all the details. Same for the gas. They will tell you also, for example, the gas. Usually, you have like a chaudière, like a heater, gas heater, and you are supposed, as a tenant or as the owner, if you don't have a tenant, you are supposed to maintain that and to have someone checking this every year. And this is very important. And when the diagnostics comes, the guys are going to check if the piece looks recent, if it has been maintained and everything. So then, if the diagnostics are bad, then of course, when you are going to sell it, for example, then you will have to, either you do the work to renovate it to make sure that there is no discussion, or you have to let the buyer do the renovation. And some of them will be reluctant. I had this case with a buyer who said, okay, it seems that there is an issue. I want to make sure that before I buy it, the issue is solved, and I want to have a note from the electrician guy to say that it's solved and I don't risk anything.
Yeah, which is normal too. I get it. There's some people that buy an apartment or a house, and they completely gut it and redo everything. But I mean, most people will try to work with what they have. So yeah, if something is completely wrong and is an anomaly, not normal, then yeah, I think it should kind of be the buyer, the seller, sorry, to fix that, or in the case of a renter situation, the owner, obviously. But I mean, holy cow. And like, from speaking of the tenant standpoint, do the tenants get a copy of that? And do they know, do they get to read all the diagnostics report of an apartment that they're renting?
Yes, now you do have, except for vacation rental where you don't send like the 30 pages of diagnostics. But yes, the owner has to provide them, or the agent has to provide them. And we strongly advise the tenant to read them. The issue would be when there is some issue in the diags, and that if the owner didn't take care of it, or if the owner took care of it, but we didn't redo the diag, because of course there is a cost when you do that. It's not free. Like if you do the renovation, sometimes you don't redo automatically the diagnostic. So this is sometimes tenants can be a little skeptical, and they might ask questions. But we'll talk about one of the major diagnostic in the next episode that will definitely have the tenant to be in a very, very strong position when it comes to rent.
That's a very good point that you just mentioned, that most times owners, if there has been a problem with an issue that's come up in the diagnostics report and they have fixed it, it's true. It's rare that they redo the diagnostics right after.
Yeah, they will do it when they have the chance to do so, when they need to do so, if they sell it, or if there is a request from the tenant, which is not an issue as far as we know that the work has been done. Because if there is an issue with the electrical system and an accident, the insurance don't care if the last diagnostic is up to date. They want to make sure that between the diagnostics and the accident, the renovation was taken care of.
Yeah, as long as they can prove, I guess, that the work was done.
Exactly.
Hi.
I guess that's a lot for today. We have to save some time for the next episode, which will be very important.
Dum da dum dum dum.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, it was a very informative podcast, but I really do think that they should somehow throw bed bugs in there. If they do disgusting termites, they should do disgusting bed bugs too.
Yeah. You're right.
And I hate to say it, but cucarachas. Ew.
Yeah, we don't have that much. I've been living in New York for a few months back, a few years back now, and there is nothing compared to New York. We are lucky on that.
No, it's true. And when I lived in the Caribbean, when I was living in St. Martin, we had the flying ones, and it was so disgusting. And God forbid if you were someone with long hair, I've seen them getting caught in people's hairs. Oh, I'm getting disgusted.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stop picturing that.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about this anymore. Well, thank you for all the information, Marie.
You're very welcome.
That was great. And I look forward to continuing our discussion about the importance of diagnostics and something very important in our next episode.
Yes. Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Bye for now. Thanks for listening to Paris, A State of Mind, featuring Gail of Perfectly Paris and Marie of Lokim, both who are founding members of the SPLM. Paris, A State of Mind is produced by Paris Underground Radio. The music, Jazz in Paris, is by Media Right Productions. For more information on this show and others, go to parisundergroundradio.com.
This episode of Paris, A State of Mind was produced by Jennifer Garrity for Paris Underground Radio. For more great content, join us on Patreon at patreon.com/Paris Underground Radio.